We are back after our 2-week break, and I am excited to bring on Charlie. Him and I met at the latest Podfest here in Orlando.
Podfest, woo! Yeah,
Yes, Charlie, it's great to see you. Thanks for coming on.
it's great to see you again. It was great meeting you at Podfest, Vincent, and learning about you. And thank you for coming and talking to me at Author's Alley at Podfest Expo.
Yes, I met him at Author's Alley, and I had to bring him on the show. He's got a great book, and we're going to talk all about that. But to everyone viewing on, thank you for stopping by to Writing with Authors. The YouTube channel is finally growing, which means the show is growing now that we are over 50 interviews. And today, I have the chance to interview another published writer. If it's your first time stopping in today, be sure to check out all the shows. I sit down with published writers of all forms, whether it's magazines, ebooks, print books, you name it. I try to add value to everyone because you never know what you are looking for by tuning in today. We get right to the point on these shows. Each show is about 10 minutes. So let me preview this book before I bring on Mr. Charlie Birney to explain it better. And this book is written in verse and illustrated by author. It is called The Tao of Podcasting, and it shows how podcast production can create memorable stories by remembering the ancient art of listening, deepening the silence before sound, combining stillness and fluidity, developing auditory wisdom, engage listening and talking forward, and also reigniting your passion for podcasting. And if you don't know me by now, you know that I have a big passion for podcasting because I'm able to help people in the 3 areas I am passionate about, which is inspiring entrepreneurship, silencing that mental health stigma, and inspiring writers and readers worldwide. And this book, it does so much. The ancient texts of the Way of Virtue have long been sources of comfort and inspiration. Each verse is intended to be a meditation on a page amid an often loud and frenetic world. And I read this book. I love it. Similarly, The Tao of Podcasting is a contemplative, insightful, and inspiring book that invites readers to draw or add their own thoughts to the page it's on. And as you can see, this is going to add a lot of value to everyone, especially those in the podcasting world or those looking to join the podcasting world. There is a lot of things that go on behind the scenes in podcasting. It may become easier as you get a system in place, which I'm sure Charlie will talk all about. But we're going to start out with this book. Did you always want to become a published author, Charlie? Let's talk about that to kick it off.
You know, I thought about that before we started. I don't think I intended to. I always loved writing. Absolutely. I've always loved writing and sketching, or as I call it, doodling. As I said in the book, those drawings that you mentioned, they started about 9 years ago when I started my podcast journey, and I had no goal for them. I would just draw while I was monitoring a session. I would doodle all the time, especially ever since I got an iPad, but long before I would carry a pad with me and draw, or just an old piece of paper. And so I never had a goal for those drawings in the book, which tell a second story, the story of my podcasting journey, until I finished the book and thought about the Chinese calligraphy that is generally seen in the Tao Te Ching. And I thought, I'm going to switch out what is normally seen as the brush strokes in the book and use my drawings. And then I realized it told the second story about my journey as a podcaster. So I always loved writing. I didn't intend to write a book. I will tell you a quick funny story. My dad wrote a book on celestial navigation when I was very young. And when I finished, I published a book called Podcasting Made Simple a few years ago with one of my clients. And I went to that book and counted how many pages was his book and counted how many pages was my book. And they were like 98 and 96 pages long. So I didn't intend to become an author, but I'm very pleased, and especially with this work, because it's basically evergreen, a word that you and I use probably quite a lot. It's not about the technical aspect so much as about the philosophical aspect of podcasting and the art of communication.
I love the insight. I love the passion you have put behind these books. So you mentioned you have 2 books. Are there plans for number 3?
I am. I'll bring up my dad again, who's not with us any longer. But during his life, Dad wrote 21 folk songs, mostly topical, and they cover about 45 years of news events and satirical events in his mind. And I just want them not to be forgotten. I realized that the Zoom wake for my father, because of the quarantine that if I didn't do anything, my cousins had me sing his arguably most famous song about John Glenn the astronaut. And I realized if I didn't do anything, no one was going to do anything. And I've been singing those songs since I was a camper and a counselor. And so I started writing sort of the history behind, a short history behind each one of his folk songs. And I've got a couple other things in mind, maybe a comic book someday, Vincent. But yes, I am working on something else, not necessarily about podcasting this time.
Well, now that we're in touch, I'll have to be aware and look out. That way I can bring you back on the show. Do you have a copy of your book to hold up for everybody?
I do.
I was going to say, I'll go grab mine in the other room if I have to. There it is. Bring that a little closer. That's the Tao of Podcasting. Where can we find this book?
Currently, it is available in-store and online at a bookstore here in Washington, D.C. called Politics and Prose. If you want one with a doodle inside it, reach out to me. I'll be giving my contact information later.
Yeah, be sure to stick around to the end of the show. We're going to find out exactly how to get in touch with Charlie, learn more about his company. This is a preview to That Entrepreneur Show coming this summer. But before we get to all that, what are some pieces of writing advice you can lay out for our fellow writers out there and aspiring writers?
Well, the one is very simple, very direct, and I got from my wife. I wanted to lay this out because when I saw that as a possible question, I realized I really do have a solid piece of advice. When you are publishing, self-publishing, most importantly, think about the spine of your book. When I looked at an early draft, an early print copy of this, and many of my friends who've self-published have done the same thing, the name was at the bottom inch of the spine. You're already nodding your head, but my wife works in the media center of a public school here, Bethesda Chevy Chase Public School, shout out, and she immediately looked at this. Well, she realized it immediately, and then she waited 24 hours to tell me because she knew how excited I was about this and said, well, look, you can't put your name at the bottom inch because that's what my peer group covers up with a label before we even put it in the library. So please do us a favor and put your name at the top of the spine. So that's a hardcore thing. For the writing part, Vincent, with me doing this interpretation of the Tao Te Ching into the Tao of Podcasting, I think it's just important to go with the flow. They often call Taoism, Alan Watts, a famous American Taoist, called it the watercourse way. And that's actually the first book on Taoism that I ever read. It's important to not force it. I'm sure you agree with this. When I came across a section or a passage that I wanted to cover that I was having difficulty with, I just kind of moved on, circled around, put it in the back burner, and thought of it. Finally, the first verse, which was one of my greatest challenges, just came out effortlessly at the end.
Amazing.
So to work with the content and not at odds, maybe that seems basic, but I had to relearn it myself when I was doing this book.
Not forcing things is something I learned along the way. A lot of my books came out of need, the mental health books for kids, and the third book, Mr. Lanci Talks Mental Health, I wanted to put out before the election. It was the Trump and Biden election, I believe, or the Trump-Hillary one. And I thought this is a great time to have adults work on their mental health because of how crazy the world's been. But I forced it out. I didn't have any marketing time. I didn't have any planning time. And I kind of just put it out. And now for me, with this next book I have, Going to School, it's going to be the official book for toddlers. It's that mindfulness book for kids. I've been able to promote it a bit and let people know that it's coming out. And I feel more comfortable with the release. So that's definitely some great advice there. Yeah. The spine is something people don't think about. I've done all mine with Amazon, and I'm sure all the other writers out here are going to be frustrated with me as well. They've done all these formatting changes and all of these things where this latest book, I've been going back and forth with my illustrator back and forth, and it's become a nightmare. So be sure to do your due diligence into having the back cover look correctly, the front cover look correctly, let alone the spine. It's great that you've got your book in stores. Just finally approved for Barnes and Noble a few weeks ago. I think it's online, so cool. Which is nice. I mean, as someone who has only done self-publishing, it's a humbling feeling because it may have taken, my first book was in 2019, so it's taken some time. But in entrepreneurship, I'm sure you can attest to, it's a long process, and
it's a long process.
Put those learning lessons together. We've talked about it a lot today. We've talked about your next book, your current book, your past book, some great pieces of writing advice, why you became an author. And now I have to ask for ways to get in touch with you, for people to say hello. All things Charlie.
On Instagram, I talk about the book, and podcasting, it's just Tao, T-A-O, Tao of Podcasting. On Twitter, I'm C Birney, C-B-I-R-N-E-Y. The company that I co-founded with Oscar Ceballos is called Podvillemedia. The website's just Podville, PODVILLEMEDIA.com. And those are the main ways to get a hold of me. Please reach out to me if you have any questions.
I appreciate the kindness. Everyone, be sure to say hello and be sure to be on the lookout for that entrepreneur show. If you're in the Washington area, go grab that book at the bookstore. That way you can maybe do a meet and greet. And the show is at Writing with Authors on Facebook, Instagram. I do all my posts at Vincent A. Lanci. And be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel if you enjoy this show, because we have a great one again coming next week. Charlie, thank you for taking the time to start your day with me as we record this bright and early.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure, Vincent.